It's rock and roll!
Welcome to the Look It's Rock and Roll podcast. I'm your host, Julian Gill. Today, I've got my partner in crime back with me, Mark Anthony Kay, who is, of course, you're the brain behind Projekt Gemineye.
Yes, I am.
You are Projekt Gemineye, and you're about to drop a new single on us, which is going to be coming out on November the 12th. It's called The Holy Shield. So I want to take the opportunity to talk to you about your new single and the forthcoming album from which it is called. So why don't you tell us about The Holy Shield and Book 3 of In the Year 3073?
Well, as tradition goes with my stuff, I usually like to release a single a little bit before the album comes out. And now, before I talk about the single, I finally have made a solid release date for the album, because I know I've been kind of like floundering here and there saying, oh, I'm going to do it here or maybe here. I don't know when I'm going to, I wasn't 100% certain, but I finally committed to a January 21st release date for the record finally. So I like having a deadline, because then it kind of makes me get at it at sort of, first gear, and like, oh, I still have lots of time. Now I have not so much time. Now, the single is always something that I kind of embrace putting out, because I feel that a good single helps getting people hyped up and psyched up for a record. And, the first single, you got to make sure that it's something that it piques people's interest. And also, I think it's important to give them something that will be a foreshadow of what's to come. You don't want to give them a song that's going to be totally different than the rest of the record, and they get the rest of it and you're like, well, it doesn't sound anything like the single. The single, I think, should be something that has a lot of the elements of the rest of the record within it. And I think this song definitely does that. And also, I think it kind of gives you a little bit of a hint into the story of what's happening, because, as you know, at the end of book 2, there was some trouble going on. People were captured. People came in from the military from the other planet Earth to come and rescue them. And that's where it sort of ended. Yes, there it is. And with the ending of that, you weren't really sure what was going to happen, because it was kind of like, the staring across each other, who's going to crack first sort of situation. And just to give you a slight little, hint as to what is going on, the Holy Shield is like their special military ops for planet Earth. These people are like their Air Force, but they're a very special Air Force. They're all blessed by the Pope and have never lost in battle ever. That's why they're called the Holy Shield. They're the shield of planet Earth.
Oh, nice. So how hard was it for you to choose which song to use as this single? Because like you say, you don't want to give away too much. You want to kind of piquing people's interests.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a couple in mind that you flip-flopped between before you settled on this? Or was it, no, I know that's the one?
It's funny. The second I wrote the lyrics and wrote the chorus melody for this song, immediately I was like, this is the song. This is the one that's going to be it. This is the one that immediately when I heard the chorus, even when I did it in rough form, I was like, this is pretty catchy. I think this would be a good idea to use this one for a chorus. Not to say that the other ones aren't catchy, but some of the other songs that have catchy parts are maybe too long, like the song the God of Time and Design. That's one of the last songs. It's like a 12-minute song. You can't release that as a single. That's way too long. But immediately this song jumped out because of those reasons. The chorus was one of the things that stuck out right away, vocally, musically. And I kind of come from the school where I like a lot of sort of melodic hard rock, melodic pop music, melodic anything that has a catchy chorus catches my attention. And I think that's important in songwriting, whether it's even progressive metal.
Right, and this isn't a firestorm of music. It's not an eruption in any sense. The first thing that kind of catches me about the song is that it's, number one, very, very catchy. and it slips into a groove very easily and brings you in. Your vocals, you seem to have multiple layers of vocal going there. And one of the things that I like is how your vocals offset by kind of fluttering keyboards in the background. So it sets a good tone and sets you up. How have you approached this as you've done? This is the third album, obviously, in the trilogy. Well, in a trilogy. Has kind of your perspective stayed the same when working on this material, the song itself, or the album in particular? I mean, you would have had some kind of, I guess, idea of where you were going with the story, but how have you approached this album compared to previous ones?
Good question, because it was, the story was always kind of figured out. I mean, I had to kind of have it figured out at one point because I had to know how much music I had to write and stuff like that. Because originally I thought I was going to just do 2 books. But then when I finished writing book 2, I was like, there's not enough here to conclude it, and it would just be way too much of a rush job to end it that way. So I extended it to book 3. Now, the great thing is that I had time to go through it, and there's been multiple variations of how I wanted to end this story, and I finally settled on a ending for the proper one. And it's just one of those things where I knew ahead of time how I wanted to end it, but I had to make sure that I had enough material to tell the story without going what people go like song to song and say, well, what happened between here and here? I don't know. There's not enough information. So I made sure that I put in enough lyrical content this time. And another thing that I did differently this time, I think you probably noticed once you hear the record, is I took back a lot of the focus, because before I had a lot of guests on book 2. I had multiple people playing bass. I had Joe doing vocals and stuff like that. But, Joe is a fix on this record as well, because I have to have another person at least to represent other characters in there. So Joe is on this record as well, and he plays bass as well. And David Donnelly appears on a song as well on this record on bass. But I wanted to take back a lot of the vocals to myself, and I also wanted to take back a lot of the bass guitar playing to myself, because I wanted the songs to have a certain feel. I wanted them to give me a certain feeling when I heard them, like, oh, that reminds me of, let's say, old Genesis, or reminds me of something from Gentle Giant, or reminds me of something from Rush. You know what I mean? And when I hear a song in my mind, it's difficult sometimes to convey those ideas to guest people. With Joe, I don't have a problem with him whatsoever, because, for example, when I sent this song over to him to play bass, he wrote me back, he wrote me back a note saying, wow, I think I got to get my best Geddy Lee riffs out for this one. And so right away, he kind of knew that I was looking for sort of a Permanent Waves era bass sort of style in there. And he pretty much nailed it as far as I'm concerned. So I'm hoping that that's kind of answering your question of what you asked.
It is, and you totally touched on one of the things I wanted to ask you about, who is playing that bass, because there's some really nice bass runs on there. I don't know if I took Geddy Lee as the inspiration for that, but I really enjoyed where, again, it's your tight production, keeps everything in a proper place, so you hear things, or I hear things maybe where they're supposed to be heard, and they kind of sneak up on you, like, oh, focus. You're like, oh, shiny, so there's a lot going on musically, but it's not crowded. So it's not like a waterfall of sounds. It's more like a wide river, easily flowing, down a channelway, which I think is one of the nice elements on that. So, congrats to Joe on that. Is it you on keyboards? Is that all you?
Yeah, everything on there except for the bass is me.
Right. What about guitars on this particular song? Did you have, or the album itself, did you have a usual arsenal that you went to, or did you bring into some of these songs or the single anything new in terms of instrumentation?
Actually, the funny thing is I did something that I hadn't done on any of the prior records. And that is, this time I went in, did my usual setup, but I took a DI box, this really nice DI box that I have. And what I did is I split the signal this time. I did it to my line 6 stuff that I have normally that I use. or I run it to my Hughes and Kettner amp that I have over here, right? And I mic up a cabinet in my room, which I'm sure my dog loves when it's turned on. But I also send myself a direct signal, like a totally clean signal. I mute it while I record because I don't want to hear like blang, bling, blang, like just like a normal guitar playing at the same time. But why I did that is because I remember reading some great interviews with a few different producers saying that they always record a clean direct signal because later on in the mix, if they feel that something's missing in the guitar sound, they can take that and run it to an amp modulator and find different amps to say, oh, this sounds like it needs a Vox added to it, or it needs a Laney amp to it. And that came in extremely handy in that situation because for this song, for example, the sound was really like thick, almost marshmallowy. And I'm like, I'm losing a little bit of focus on some of the noting. So I fired up a sort of semi-clean old plexi Marshall sound, like not very distorted, but just on the edge of breakup. And I like smoothed that in to that other sound. And then all of a sudden, bam, I heard every little note. I heard every little pick that I did. And that's exactly what I needed to do. And I think that I'm going to do that from here on in because it definitely added to the sonic element of the sound.
So you get the textures and the definition that you hear in your head after recording it. No, that's a great idea because then you've got the original, completely clean signal. You can do what you want with that at that point. So with that, and it's the same performance. So you're not trying to.
And just to let you know too, I used my Les Paul for most of it, and I used my SG, but for the solos, I only used my Jackson, my white Jackson guitar there with the whammy bar. I mean, that guitar is so good mixed with like a Soldano guitar amp sound, and I can just get it to that point of really like really loud crunchy upper mids on it, and that because that has a Jeff Beck pickup in it, it gives it that really good definition in that soloing spot. And when you add the right amount of delay to it, I could do so many nice Alex Lifeson-ish sort of guitar leads in there with the harmonics and stuff like that. I'm warning you, that's all over this record. All kinds of Alex Lifeson influenced guitar leads on this record. I was, Rush happy at that point. So I really added a lot of that sort of stuff to it. And that guitar really came through for me on solos.
Alex Lifeson with a Jackson. I mean, I've got two guitars behind me that you'd be able to see, different tunings. Obviously, one's a Jackson. That's my Def Leppard and Judas Priest guitar. And on the other side is the Les Paul or the Epiphone with for the Aerosmith and Rush and Kiss stuff. So, tools of the for me, it's not trade, just for my kicks. But it's great to hear about the different guitars that you're using. What about FX? Is there anything that you find yourself, preferring for a song like this? Or I don't think you become Kirk Hammett. I don't hear much wah.
No, not a lot of wah. No wah on this record at all, actually. I do like this thing called a doubler, which is kind of almost like a chorus pedal, but a little less like sweepy and none of that stuff. It's just it kind of takes the sound and kind of just like offsets it a little bit, so it gives it a slight chorusing. It's almost like a micro pitch shift effect, and I really gotten to like that. It definitely adds a little bit of upper sparkle to the guitars, which is really helpful because when you start getting into 11 tracks of drums, 2 tracks of bass, 7 keyboard tracks, 5 vocals, and like 6 guitar harmonies and this and that. I mean, things are going to start getting lost, especially the rhythm guitars, right? So when you add that in there, it really adds a nice dimension to it. And I've always found that my secret weapon now is I have this MXR like preamp pedal. It's like a what's that thing called? Hang on, I want to see if I can find it. It's right here. Give me 1 second. Sorry, how professional was that? This is exactly the thing that I highly recommend is the Echoplex preamp pedal. Basically, just plug into this, and then the output goes into your amp, the front of the amp, and it's just a little gain thing. It's not distortion. It's just kind of like it just front ends your amp a little bit more, so it drives your tubes a little bit hotter, maybe. And it's subtle, but the difference that it makes when you do this to, like, let's say 2 guitar tracks is noticeable. If I take it off and do it and then put it on and do it, then it's really noticeable, and it really helps the tone. It doesn't make it fuzzy. I hate that kind of bumblebee sound. It just gives it more oomph, and it just emphasizes the frequencies that guitars like around 1K, 2K. It kind of pushes it around there. So that's a very important part of the whole signal. And obviously for me, delay is my friend when it comes to guitar solos. I like doing this now where you can assign the delay pedals to a sync, so it'll find your tempo of your song and it'll sync to the tempo. So you can just say, okay, I want quarter note repeats, eighth note repeats, and it'll do it perfectly to the timing of it. And it just helps with that, because you don't want to have the repeats all over the place unless it's something that you strategically want to have like that. But it's really helpful. The delay for the solos are very helpful, and that's so Alex likes that.
Yeah, what would the Beatles have done with the technology that we have today? And wow, what did they do with the technology available to them? Two sides of that same coin. This song's 5 minutes 45 seconds in duration. For you, that's a pretty short song. So it did beg the question whether it was an edit or the full track, and is the single mix going to be different to the album mix? Because don't you usually go back and then mix the album as an album rather than as individual tracks?
Yeah, absolutely. There is no edit. It is the proper length. It's the same thing as the album. The difference is going to be in the mix, because I went in with this just clearly saying to myself, forget about the album, just mix this to how you feel will benefit it as a single. And I did, because when you put out a song as a single, there's certain things I think should be very present. The vocals are very important. Maybe the vocals might be a touch louder in the single version than the album version, let's say. Maybe some of the drums might be not as huge and boomy as it might be on an album version, right? I just kind of look at it in the sense that the things that are going to emphasize the melody need to be brought up, like some of the melodic lead parts, bring them up a teeny bit louder, and some of the grandiose keyboard parts, you can probably bring those back a little bit in the single version, and the harmonies of the vocals, they got to be heard in this version. You know what I mean? Because I think that's the selling point in it, is the vocals and the harmonies of the guitars in here. So the mix is different in that way. It maybe doesn't, I maybe wouldn't experiment as much. Like I maybe wouldn't say, oh, what happens if I put this really weird phaser into a reverb and this and that. I save that more for the album approach, because I kind of, it's funny you mentioned the Beatles, because sometimes the Beatles used to do this thing where they would release a single and never put it on the album. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't even be on the record, right?
Oh, but yeah, some of their best stuff was saved for past masters.
Exactly. So, and while I wasn't going to do that exactly, but I kind of like the idea of saying I'm going to just do a separate mix for the single and a totally different mix for the album. And I know that lots of people who are supporters of my music love that too, because they're like, oh, great. So that means I can probably get like a bonus disc of different mixes, which I offer sometimes in the pre-order, right? Alternate mixes and stuff like that. And people love those kind of things. So to me, it kind of gives me the push to go ahead and do that without any sort of fear of people going, oh shit, another different mix, like.
Yeah, it can get a bit tedious, at times with some of these bands that do all these mixes, remixes, and all of that. Yeah. Okay, again, this single's coming out on November the 12th, and you've just, let us know that the album will come out on January the 21st, 2022, right?
Yeah.
I had the right date.
That's correct.
Just a couple of, before we segue into another brief topic is, book 3 brings you to closure on this story. Did you feel that you got to that closing point of the story adequately with 3 albums, or do you ever see dropping a single here or there to fill in any blanks that you feel you might have left in the story? Or is it really the end?
Great question. Okay, well, I think for people who have enjoyed this story, I think I have some good news because there's always, I think, an opportunity to add little songs here and there to fill in parts of the story. Because I try to, whatever I can't put into song, I try to put into text in the booklet to talk about the story as it goes and fill in the story as best as I can that way, and you have the music to support it as well. So if there's something that I feel I didn't talk about enough, then I can go back and maybe put in a song or two and release them separately and have them fill in part of a story. So that's always possible. And the great thing that I did with the ending of this story is that it is the end. Don't worry, there's not going to be like book 4 coming up next year or something. But I did leave it in a way that if it kind of tickles my fancy, let's say 3 years from now, to maybe expand on the story, I've left it in sort of a way where I probably could do that.
Right, and I only asked that. That's just off the cuff question because last night I watched Prometheus, which was the prequel and kind of the alien saga.
Yeah.
I'm like, does Mark ever see himself going back and doing that kind of thing? So that's just where that question comes from, along with I guess leftovers, because your other musical project, Dark Monarchy, you recently dropped a single, an EP on us, Fork in the Road. So
Yes.
while I've got you, I want to talk about the Fork in the Road because I've thoroughly enjoyed listening. It's a 3-song EP, kicks off with the Carousel, which immediately grabbed my attention. Number one, I think, come on, guys, you've got this quality is just on the cutting room floor, and you guys had to take the axe and decide which were the songs that made that album, and you've got these left over. It really is amazing. So why don't you tell us about the Fork in the Road and how you guys decided to do that as an EP release?
Well, as you know, Julian, we're good friends and we talk a lot about music off the record and on the show and stuff like that. And my kind of approach to music is that I like keeping records between a certain length, 40, 45 minutes. I always kind of like to make my records available for vinyl if possible, right? And I've always thought that that also was a great amount of time for just listening in general. I think that once you get into records that are like 65 minutes and longer, sometimes people's attention seems to wane and they don't get as focused on it. So we've always agreed, and Joe's agreed with me as well, to let's keep it between 40 and 45 minutes long. That means sometimes our music needs to get cut, right? And believe me, this wasn't very simple to do. When we said to ourselves, okay, we have already 40 minutes and we had, like, let's say 5 songs, we're like, okay, well, what are you going to do with these other 4 or 5 songs or whatever? So we always said ahead of time, we're not going to just let them be put aside and never to be heard again. Well, we will release them in some context. But, we just decided to vote on it and which songs we thought were the best and that had our best performances or that we thought had our best lyrical, performances or lyrical ideas. And we went with it like that. And, I had no problem with it because Carousel, I thought was a great song, but I think, there was other songs I thought that were better than that. Now, Carousel is a song that's kind of close to me because it's completely written lyrically and vocally sung by me on the Dark Monarchy, which is rare. I think that's the first song that I think I sing completely by myself on a record. And on the actual record before there is one song on there as well that I do sing as well. But so that's very new for me. So, but these songs, they're good, but sometimes in order to keep within our structure, things have to be cut. And were they the right songs? I mean, people might argue and say, no, man, I would have took this song off and put this one on instead. But at least this way, those songs are now available to people. They can put them into their listening devices. And you know what? You can arrange the record now as you wish. So the idea of these songs they were supposed to be like her journal entries while she's on her travels, because all roads lead to Rome was sort of like an adventure for her, like she on her little trip to wherever she was going. And these are supposed to be like little diary entries along the way.
Yeah, the Carousel. I mean, it borders on the melancholic, but's kept away from there. It becomes a bit sanguine. The fluttering keyboards, that's the stuff in the background that brings it back into kind of the light rather than let it become too brooding. So you kind of answered my own question, which was, were these all three from the All Roads Lead to Rome album era rather than the debut?
Yeah, these are all from this latest album sessions. Yeah, those are all done from that. Nothing from the first album has been left over. We did release the songs that we didn't use on the first album in its own EP that came out, the Surrogate Other. That was the one that was out before. And that there again, that was another song that we really liked, but that one was more of a case that it was one of the songs that just wouldn't fit in anywhere. If we put this song in, then it would be too short. If we took other songs out, if we added it in with some of the songs we had in there, it was too long. So that was always kind of the one that was giving us trouble. So we just took that one out. Right.
I always remember Steven Tyler telling producers, "You're trying to kill my children," when talking about song selection and how songs change in the studio sometimes. Without you, I mean, is that kind of an analog to Carousel, which is you vocally and lyrically? Because this one feels very much like Joe. Especially some of the lyrical phrasing is, I don't know how that guy sings some of the stuff that he manages to put the phrasing into so perfectly, because there's some complex vocals there. So all respect to Joe Bailey.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100% because I remember what happens sometimes is we'll work on the songs and then he'll send me over the lyrics and I'll read the lyrics sometimes before I even get to hear it. And I'm reading it and going, these are great lyrics, but how the hell are you singing this in the music that we wrote? There's like way too much words in this, but no, he does it, and it comes back, and I'm like, wow, I love it. It's like he just has a different approach to singing than I do. I was more taught of the way that less is more. Less words means that you can do different phrasing, you can hold words longer, you can do different things with words if you have less of them in a sentence. If you have a lot of words, sometimes it has to be done rapid fire and there's no space for, doing little, flourishes and stuff like that. I'm not sure if it was a producer guy who taught me that, but that was always being fixed firmly in here. Oh, it was where I heard that too? Roger Waters, The Making of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Us and Them. He said, He goes like in there, he said it's better sometimes to leave space because you can even do stuff like delays and stuff like that can add to the performance of the vocals by doing that. If you couldn't do something like that with the way Joe sings in that song, because the delay you wouldn't even hear anything because it's just getting trampled by all the words, right?
Yeah, echoes and breathing. Two very Pink Floyd-ish phrases, obviously. The final track I'd like to just know about is Reduced to Clear. That's, analogies, metaphors, idioms, that kind of speaks a little bit more to kind of my perception of Joe's contributions as well. Tell us about that one. Great concepts within there. I don't want to say anything about it musically because I think people need to go to Bandcamp and listen to it.
Yeah, Joe is really strong with lyrics. I mean, I've always said that I was very happy that he wanted to do so many of them because I always said from the beginning, listen, how do you want to do this? And he's like, listen, I'll write as much of the lyrics as you want. And it's funny, he always told me, he goes, lyrics are not my thing, he thought, but I go, lyrics are definitely your thing. They're very good. You have a lot to say and you have a good way about it. And I like your kind of Britishness about it, how you can say it in a way that's very forceful, but doesn't have to be rude. You know what I mean? That's the one thing I like about it, And Reduced to Clear is sort of his nudging the ribs and sort of comical Monty Python sort of reference to his grocery sort of history from before, because I think he used to do stuff like that when he was younger, where he used to work at some sort of a grocery store or something like that. And he, it's sort of such a grocery thing, reduced to clear, like these things are, you know how they have the reduced to clear shelf, right? So it's sort of like a metaphor in his writing. So great stuff. I really enjoyed that song. That was one of the ones that we had a little bit of trouble, leaving off the record.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I was thinking of. The metaphors are very kind of gritty, They're you mentioned Roger Waters. You know, they are stark kind of observations of modern society. Everything is reduced to clear, you know, disposable heroes, those sorts of things that come across. So all very good. And again, these aren't demos. These are fully recorded tracks. So
Yes.
these aren't throwaways. I think that's part of the point that is so stunning to me, is that you fully record, you put all that love, all that passion, all that attention to detail and crafting into the songs, and then you end up with three. Oh, here's an EP, guys. You know, we just happen to have these three that didn't make the album. So it's very cool. From that perspective. So Bandcamp for Dark Monarchy, obviously we're talking about the Projekt Gemineye single here, The Holy Shield, which will be released on Friday's the 12th, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll drop around Friday, because we never know with you if Friday really does mean Friday. And people can find you at Projekt Gemineye on Bandcamp, and I'll put the link in the video here. One last thing before we wrap. And that is, what are your plans for 2022? Do you have any, are you setting yourself any goals in advance musically? You've now decided on your release date for book 3, which means that that's done, dusted, other than, you know, the inevitable, you know, CDs and LP, if you so choose to do so in the current challenges to do that. How are you mapping out your year, and what are your hopes?
Well, just to answer that question, yes, I am planning fully to do CD and vinyl for book 3. Just there might be a little bit of a wait, but I fully intend to go through with it. Now, 2022 for me is going to be interesting because, as you know, besides, you know, Projekt Gemineye and the Dark Monarchy, I also have Mark Anthony Kaye and the Lower Third Collective, and I also have a little record label called Riffical Records, which I take care of, and I have a little well, not a little, but I have a very important artist in the name of Joe Bailey on there. And he's already written another solo record already. Oh, it's already done.
That's exciting.
Yes. And it's going to be a very great record. It's a concept album. I'm not going to give any of it away and let him do all his hyping for it. But it's pretty much done. When I talked to him last, it was pretty much, you know, like 95% done as far as even recording. So I was like, wow, this guy, he can write records at a drop of a hat almost. And it's a great idea, great story. So that's one thing that's going to be on deck for 2022. So keep that in mind. Also, I am planning to do another round of Mark Anthony Kaye and the Lower Third Collective in 2022. I have some great ideas for some more songs, maybe even doing more of a full length style record with that. So far, I've only done like 4 songs and stuff like that. So that's going to be on deck. There will be another Projekt Gemineye album. I want to try to at least get 2 out, because this one's going to come out in January. So I have a full 12 months to make another one. I'm pretty sure I will do that anyways. And plus, because it's not a concept thing, I can write anything I want. And I think I'm just going to go back to that for at least another record, just some songwriting in general. So that's going to be on the horizon, as they say. And, you know, this might sound really odd, but I always have these little urges to do different types of records. Like, some people tell me, hey, are you going to ever do an instrumental record? I don't want to do instrumental records. I like instrumental albums, but I don't know if it's just my bag. But there's, you know, other types of music that I like doing as well. I mean, I'm a big fan of fusion music, or what they sometimes call yacht rock, even, like, you know, like Steely Dan, like Asia, like that album. You know what I mean? Like, I love that stuff. Now, can I see myself doing a whole album of that stuff? I don't know. But, you know, I'm going to be experimenting, I think, a bit in 2022. So if you sometimes see some odd, you know, singles come out of different music, don't be surprised. But, you know, it's going to be, I think the mainstays are going to be coming out for sure. New Joe Bailey album, new Projekt Gemineye, which is coming out now, and probably another one later in the year. And I really, really do want to do another Mark Anthony Kaye and the Lower Third Collective. Oh, and of course, how could I forget? January means writing time for me and Joe for the Dark Monarchy. So another Dark Monarchy record.
Nice. Well, you know what? You've got the power to drop a single whenever you get the whim, don't you? So you don't have to be tied to anything. You're an independent musician. Excited about Joe Bailey, excited about Dark Monarchy, but for now, totally excited about Projekt Gemineye. So where can people find you?
So, of course, the Bandcamp page, which is fairly simple, projectgemineye.bandcamp.com. You can go on there. I got all the stuff there, EPs, singles, albums are all there. Just for people who are still maybe new to this, there are still vinyl left of Book 1 and Book 2. There's about 10 copies of Book 1 left and just under 25 copies of Book 2. And they're both going for $15 Canadian, okay, for vinyl. That's a steal, okay? So especially if you live in the US, that's like $8. So if you don't have a copy of that, grab a copy, because once they're done, they're pretty much done. All the other records on vinyl are gone. They're sold out. But there's still CDs available. People have been buying them, which I thank you very much for that. Also, you can find me on Facebook. I have a few groups, the Projekt Gemineye group page, the Dark Monarchy group, and there's also a Riffical Records group page, which is pretty handy because it talks about all the bands in one spot. If you're interested to find out stuff about what's going on, you can always go there. And of course, there's also a fantastically made projectgemineye.com page, which I'm trying to remember which fantastic person did that for me.
I don't know, but he probably better get off his butt and get it updated for the upcoming single.
Yeah, but whoever this individual was did a really great job, and I highly recommend to check it out. It's just projectgemineye.com. All kinds of information there and great imagery you put up there, so check it out.
All right, Mark Anthony K., thank you so much for giving us an update on the Holy Shield and your other musical projects. Take care for now.
Take care.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe to us, like us, or even leave us a review. You can find us and join the conversation on Facebook.